Okay, guys, I am back with another video. This is just some post-game thoughts and a reaction to the Ravens versus Panthers game. And again, it was another ugly win. So obviously we still, we advanced. We're higher up in the conference now. We're 7-3. So on paper, a lot of people, they're definitely gonna hype us up and make it seem like it's more impressive than it actually is, in my opinion. Because even though we're 7-3, we're scraping out ugly wins against teams we should be blowing out. Like 13-3 against a team like the Panthers, even though there's some solid players on their defense, this is still not a team like the Panthers. It's just straight up not a threat. Like, we should be blowing these teams out, man. Just like you see what the Cowboys just did to the Vikings, and the Vikings are actually a threatening team, and they still just blew them out by 37. Like, in these games, that's the type of numbers you would expect us to be putting up. So it's like I said, it is concerning as a fan to see that we're still struggling to actually execute on that. This offense is still garbage. Like, it is what it is. Like, it's mind-blowing to me just how bad this offense is, or just how subpar this offense is. And this is an unpopular opinion. I really am not. The more I see Pat Ricard out there, the more annoyed I start to get. I know a lot of you guys, you love Project Pat, and you think he's so awesome, whatever. This dude, why is it on a consistent basis Lamar has to look to a freaking fullback, a dude that's built like a defensive tackle, as a serious option to throw the ball to? Like, one of the first things that caught my eye was around, I think it was the first quarter, where Lamar threw like a perfect pass leading Pat Ricard up the field. But that's the problem. He's throwing passes to Pat Ricard. What is happening? Why are there plays where Pat Ricard why is he an option to throw the ball to this consistently? Why? And again, that still further proves the point many people like myself have been making when it comes to still needing a receiver. Because at the end of the day, any competent receiver would have made that catch. It wasn't a hard catch. He led him perfectly, and it hit him right in the hands. Pat Ricard just is simply not fast enough, or athletic enough, or a big enough playmaker at receiver to even make what should have been a pretty routine catch. But so it still blows my mind every time I see Pat Ricard out there running routes and actually being a serious option to throw the ball to. Again, this offense is pathetic. It's getting to the point where, as much as I want them to fire Greg Roman, I'm almost starting to feel bad for Greg Roman too. Because again, regardless of how mediocre the offensive coordinator is, if you actually had good enough personnel, the play calling wouldn't even matter as much, because they would just go off script and make a bunch of plays. Part of what made Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce such a special combination when they playing with Patrick Mahomes over the years was the fact that when everything started breaking down, they knew that, listen, they could just do whatever they wanted to and do whatever they needed to make a play on the ball. Speaking of another receiver, James Prochet. Something that caught my eye was when James Prochet dropped the pass. I know, it shocked me, as I'm sure it shocked a lot of you, because as a lot of you have been not desperately, but as a lot of you have endlessly been telling me, James Prochet has such strong hands and is clearly the best receiver. But again, he dropped the pass, and not only did he drop a pass, he had on a play that should have been like about a 25 or 30 yard run by Lamar, it got called back because James Prochet had a holding call. So there was two big moments there that wasn't putting James Prochet in the best light. Obviously, I have nothing against him, but like I've said many times, James Prochet is not that guy. He could be a solid contributor if given an opportunity, but he's not that guy. He's just not, bro. Like, a lot of people said that this season he was gonna go off and have 800 yards. I don't even know if James Prochet has 8 catches on the season. So I mean, it is what it is. Kenyon Drake also had a drop. Again, and it's not that good receivers can't drop pass. Well, Kenyon Drake's a running back, but it's not that good receivers can't drop passes either. But the problem that many people like myself have against the Ravens is the simple fact that you don't have the type of playmaking receivers who can erase big mistakes. You just don't. So like when they drop passes, it's just that they just drop a pass. They don't do like a DJ Moore in that Falcons game a couple weeks ago, where DJ Moore, if I'm not mistaken, had a key drop, and then right after that went out there, made a play and got a touchdown. Like, you don't see people on this team who are capable of doing that on a consistent basis. Another takeaway I took from this game is the fact that these running backs simply can't run without Lamar Jackson, and that's something that it's been apparent all season. But again, numbers can be very misleading. There's that old saying that numbers never lie, or something like that. Like, when men lie, women lie, numbers don't lie. That's not the whole truth, because numbers can be very misleading. Because again, if you look at this team's rushing stats as a whole, you would think, yeah, this is still a great running team. But the vast majority of those stats really come down to the fact that Lamar is still running the ball effectively and averaging between 6 and 7 yards a carry. So that's making the running back room look better than what it is. These running backs, they have good games here and there, but this is not a consistent group of running backs yet. And you could say, yeah, JK's out, so that's why, and Gus Edwards, he's been out for the most part, and that's why. Yeah, but again, Ravens fans are the main NFL fans who love saying next man up, as if these guys are so replaceable, right? But yet when you bring in the Kenyon Drakes, the Mike Davises, the whoever else, all the different people that they brought in over the past couple seasons to try to fill up that running back room, they're still not getting it done. Why? Because if we're being honest, none of these running backs are really all that special. Even the main ones that we like the most, like J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards, they haven't really proven, at least not yet, that they're really that special. Because a big part of why they are such a threat is because, again, when you're playing alongside Lamar Jackson, again, NFL defenses are way more concerned with Lamar taking off than they are with most running backs in the NFL taking off. Even though Lamar's a quarterback, they're more and that puts any running back at an advantage, let alone if you're actually a special running back. You put a healthy Saquon Barkley next to Lamar. I mean, forget averaging 5 yards a carry. Saquon probably will mess around and average 9-10 yards a carry, because he's actually at that next level of running back when healthy. But yeah, man, I mean, as far as running, I didn't really take much away from it. I didn't really take much away this game from the rushing attack. There was a few solid runs that Kenyon Drake made a few solid runs. He made I forgot how many off the top of my head, because I'm outside right now, but he made a few impressive runs, and then I believe Justice Hill made an impressive run. Lamar, he had a few impressive runs, including the rushing touchdown. But there was one 25 or 30 yard run that he had that got called back because of Prochet. But I mean, it is what it is. So, but you're also, speaking of which, you're also seeing Lamar visibly a lot more frustrated than he's been in previous seasons. And he the little bit of frustration Lamar has had over the years, it's leaked out here and there. But as you can see this season, more than any other season, Lamar's he's starting to show it a lot more. And I'm seeing some people in Engravens, some people that are commenting on Engravens video saying that, man, he just has a bad attitude. But none of y'all are saying that when Tom Brady screams at his teammates every week. None of y'all are saying that when Aaron Rodgers is doing these interviews, literally throwing his receivers under the bus. At the end of the day, all these quarterbacks, they're all passionate competitors who want to win. And also, the fact of the matter is, Lamar knows this offense is bad. Lamar is not a dumb person. He's a smart person. You think if we can see that this offense is pathetic, you don't think he's aware of that? You don't think he's aware of the fact that he's playing with mediocre talent? And it's not just the lack of playmaking that frustrate him. It's also the lack of discipline this team has, which boils back to the coaches, which boils back to John Harbaugh and Greg Roman and this whole coaching staff. Because we constantly, time after time after time, are getting more penalties than so many other NFL teams. Like even in this game, we had 10 penalties for 93 yards. The Panthers had 9 for like 66 yards. But at the same time, a lot of these penalties are just like silly false starts or like unnecessary holding calls, like things that a truly disciplined team that is intending on making the Super Bowl, like many Ravens fans expect or would like. You're not expecting them to make those type of errors so consistently. So there was speaking of like bad discipline. I'm not even gonna call this bad discipline because it was also a windy game, so that might have played a role in this. But there was like a moment where there was like a high snap when Lamar was calling for the ball. They snapped the ball high, and it like went over Lamar's head again. And I had like I had like a traumatic flashback of that playoff game 2 years ago where the Ravens played the Bills, and I forgot who the center was now, but like he snapped it way over Lamar's head, and Lamar had to chase the ball down, and then the Bills tackled him and gave him a concussion, and he was out for the rest of the game. So even though at first I'd saved that in my notes as bad discipline, like taking a second to think about it, that was probably more so just like it being a windy day. But nonetheless, our O-line is still trash. Morgan Moses was not a good pickup. This dude on multiple occasions now in different games, just like how in the Saints game he made that little like he did that weird thing where you could say it was an accident, but at this point I'm getting suspicious, where he like ran into Lamar and like low-key stripped Lamar of the ball, and Lamar had to like go run, catch the ball real quick, and then try to still make a play. And now you're seeing moments in this game where Morgan Moses is still doing these little things, like damn near tackling Lamar, doing these little things, not blocking that well, doing these little things that feel like they're sabotaging. That feels like he's trying to sabotage this team. Now, obviously, I don't think he's really trying to sabotage this team, but at the same time, like these little things like that, it just makes the signing of him look like extremely overrated. One moment that was like super scary, obviously, as we all know, was like that moment where Ronnie Stanley basically just got re-injured again. I don't know if Ronnie Stanley's gonna be out the whole season, but obviously he's definitely gonna like miss some time, because like there was a moment where like in the way the play set up where, I mean, you could blame Morgan Moses, but at the same time Morgan Moses was trying to pick somebody up who was like about to rush on the inside, and unfortunately there was just simply nobody there to pick up Brian Burns. So because of that, like Brian Burns just had like a straight shot. Like Brian Burns, their best pass rusher, just had like a straight shot to Lamar Jackson, sacked him, and when Brian Burns sacked Lamar, he threw Lamar into Ronnie Stanley, so Lamar and Brian Burns basically ended up landing on Ronnie Stanley's ankle, the same ankle that Ronnie Stanley has had issues with the past 2 years. So he went out for the game. Harbaugh said that he doesn't know the status of Ronnie Stanley yet, but I don't trust anything Harbaugh really says when it comes to that. I don't trust anything Harbaugh says in general. So I'm just gonna go ahead and assume that like that means that Stanley at minimum is probably gonna miss like a couple of weeks, if not the rest of the season. So again, that's really not good, because we already had a struggling O-line, and now like literally our best player on the offensive line, who is just on to like really get back into the swing of things after missing 2 years. He might, depending on how this is, he might end up missing the rest of the year. So that's devastating. I mean, so yeah, I just spent like over 10 minutes just talking about like the offense and like the issues I had with the offense, but the defense obviously had a solid game. Granted, they're playing a bad Panthers offense, so I mean it's hard to really gauge like the defense right now, because even though they're playing good, it's against a bad offense. But nonetheless, you still got to give credit to the defense, because the defense did play well. Patrick Queen, the same Patrick Queen that y'all hate so much, the same Patrick Queen that y'all act like needs to be traded, went out here, led the team in tackles. He had 9.5 tackles. Roquan Smith also had like five or six. But again, Patrick Queen, the same guy that y'all hate, went out here and had 9.5 tackles. And I'm not even a big Patrick Queen fan, but I'm going to start, at this point, part of me wants to just start trolling y'all. Just like how a lot of y'all will go out here and constantly try to convince me that these mediocre receivers are all we need and we're good at receivers. I'm going to start beating the drum that, listen, we did not need Roquan Smith because we were good at linebacker. Again, Patrick Queen's playing better than y'all give him credit for. Jason Pierre-Paul had like a interception on Baker Mayfield. Malik Harrison had like a really impressive hit. Like it was such a painful looking hit against I think it was Shi Smith, or it was one of those guys who was on the Panthers who was about to return a punt, and just Malik Harrison just came in and just leveled him. So you just wasted a trade on you. Well, not really, but I'm gonna use the same logic y'all are using with receivers. You wasted a trade on a position we didn't need in linebacker, when the guys we already have, they're clearly playing better and better. Which again isn't a bad thing to still add more, but I don't like the fact that when it comes to offense, y'all want to tell me these mediocre guys are good enough, but then when it's time to talk about defense, nothing is ever good enough. Nothing at all. Because now a lot of y'all are talking about trading Marcus Peters. And y'all going to use that as an excuse as soon as the draft comes around to say, oh, we need to go get corner in the draft. Calais Campbell also got a sack in his game. So now Calais Campbell is at 98 sacks on his career. So it's really not that relevant to like how the rest of the season finna play out. Like, but at the same time, I think it's gonna be interesting to see. It's gonna be interesting to see if Calais Campbell gets to 100 sacks before the season's over. I think it's gonna happen, obviously, because it's like he only got like two more to go. Justin Houston also got like a half a sack. So now I think Justin Houston on the season, he might be at like either 9 or 9.5 sacks. Again, he's playing out of his mind. I'm surprised they didn't give him like a random drug test or anything like that. That dude Owe is really a bust, bro. Like, they really wasted a first round pick. Like they really wasted a first round pick, or they really wasted a first round pick, like drafting like some dude who looks like he should be like the next Julius Peppers. But the problem is they weren't focused on how he plays. He's just a bum. Like I don't even know if he ended up playing the whole game. Like, I'm really sitting here trying to think to myself, did he play the whole game, bro? I think the whole night he might have had like one tackle. And they got rid of Orlando Brown. They got rid of Orlando Brown Jr. just to go draft a guy who is barely getting multiple tackles, let alone like getting multiple sacks. So a couple of our corners still had pretty solid games. Like Marlon Humphrey, he had like an interception. Marcus Peters, he ended up stripping Shi Smith, which led to for that fumble that I believe Marlon Humphrey recovered again. So overall, the defense played well, but this still goes into the bigger point that I was bringing up, that when it comes to actually getting far in the playoffs, which is where it's going to matter the most, you can't just rely, in this day and age, you can't just rely on just having you can't just rely on just having a good offense, a good defense, and just thinking that that's all you need. This isn't 2000. A lot of you Ravens fans, you think this front offense You think they know it all because like they won a Super Bowl 22 years ago and then they won another one 10 years ago, and you think that their method is still the effective way. It's not. Because when it comes down to it, this offense is struggling to put up points against a bad team. So if they're struggling to do that, it doesn't matter how good your defense is, they're not gonna win a shootout. They not finna win a shootout against a team like the Bills. Like it's just not gonna happen. A quick point I wanted to make real quick. Torrey Smith, obviously we all know who Torrey Smith is. He came out recently and said that if Lamar Jackson had, him being Torrey, Anquan Bolden, Dennis Pitta, Ray Rice, if he had all these guys that Joe Flacco had back in the day, Lamar would not be running around as much as he is, because again, and obviously Lamar would still be a mobile quarterback, but the real point Torrey's trying to get across is the simple fact that these wide receivers suck. It's the elephant in the room that half of the Ravens fans, I feel like more and more people are finally accepting it now, but half of the Ravens fans, they don't want to accept it, bro. Like they just want to stay stuck in this idea that we're good at receiver, we got everything we need. We don't have everything we need. If we had everything we needed, we would not struggle to put up one touchdown against one of the worst teams in the NFL. Like the Panthers right now are a bottom 5 NFL team, bro. And we're struggling to put up points against them. So if we're struggling to put up points against a bottom 5 team, how do you think realistically we're gonna be able to compete in a shootout against teams against all these loaded teams like the Bills or the Chiefs, the Bengals, whoever? It's going to be very difficult. It's not impossible, but it's going to be way harder than it has to be. And in so many words, Torrey Smith, he's trying to let y'all know that he thinks these receivers suck because everybody except half of the Ravens fan base understands and is aware of the fact that these receivers suck. Now, again, they're not all the way bad, obviously, because to make it to the NFL, you got to be good, obviously. But by NFL standards and by the standards of all the elite receivers on all these other teams, this is clearly the worst receiving core in the NFL. Like, it's to a point now where even the Bears surpassed us just from adding Chase Claypool and pairing him with that guy Mooney. It's to the point where they're better than us, really, on paper. They have a better receiver room than us, man. And again, I'm not saying that and trying to make an attack on I'm not trying to attack these guys. Shout out to Devin Duvernay. He's trying to make the best of his opportunity. Like, he's had a solid season, but again, he's not an elite receiver. Like, he's like, a lot of y'all were trying to argue that, he's gonna be the new number 1. No, he's not. Rashad Bateman's been out for over a month now, and he ain't coming back for the rest of the season. And Devin Duvernay has been quiet ever since. If any of these guys were actually good enough, they would step up on a consistent basis. Again, I forgot to mention this earlier, but shout out to Demarcus Robinson. He had a very good game, obviously. He had 120 yards. He had 9 catches for 128 yards. But guess what? That doesn't mean that he's good enough to get the job done on a consistent basis, because even though a guy like Demarcus Robinson, he'll have a good game here and there, I mean, the fact of the matter is, when you need these guys to step up on a consistent basis when it matters most, they're not going to do it. Best case scenario is you're gonna get them to step up and have a good game once in a blue moon here and there. And unfortunately, a lot of Ravens fans and the Ravens front office, when Demarcus Robinson has a game like this, they'll use that as an excuse to say, you see, we know what we're doing. We're finding these gems at receiver. No, you're not. You're finding subpar receivers who every now and then they have a good game. Devontae Adams just went out there yesterday. Devontae Adams just went out there on Sunday against the Broncos and had 141 yards and 2 touchdowns, including the game-winning catch and touchdown in overtime. And nobody even cares. Nobody's really even talking about it like that. Why? Nobody really cares and nobody's really talking about it because everybody expects Devontae Adams to ball out because it's Devontae Adams. You're talking about arguably the best receiver in the NFL. So of course people are expecting that of him because he's done it so many times. Consistency. None of these receivers on the Ravens can do what Devontae has done. And none of them can do it consistently. Because even though I'm happy for DeMarcus, at the end of the day, are you expecting him to ball out like that back-to-back weeks? I'll tell you what, if DeMarcus can keep that up, that 120 yards a game or close to that on a weekly basis for the rest of the season, the next 7 games, and going into the playoffs, then we could have a different conversation. And then I'll say, hey, listen, these receivers still aren't that good, but they stepped up when it matters most. So, hey, maybe we can still just work it out with this current system. But that's not what it's going to boil down to. Best case scenario is DeMarcus has like 1 or 2 more good games like that. But for the most part, I'm expecting him to kind of fall off the face of the earth like all these other receivers do. Time and time again, all these other receivers, yeah, they might either they don't play well at all, or if they do ball out, it'll be like a one-time thing. And then, you struggle to get them to come back to that level and play that well consistently in back-to-back games. And that's what it boils down to. And that's why Torrey Smith said that these receivers suck, because he knows it and everybody else knows it. Because he knows these are not guys you could go to week in and week out and expect to ball out. You're just not going to expect that. People have spent the past 2 weeks just in awe of that Justin Jefferson catch against the Bills. Guess what? There is no receiver on the Ravens, healthy or injured. There is nobody on this team at receiver who can make that catch. Not just because it was a really difficult catch, but also because it was done at a time where they needed him the most. Where because again, Justin Jefferson week in and week out on a consistent basis. Yeah, he'll have a bad game here and there, but on a consistent basis, Justin Jefferson balls out. On a consistent basis, Justin Jefferson is just on a different level. Justin Jefferson, he's on pace to be, as far as stats go, he's on pace to be the greatest, one of the greatest receivers of all time. There is nobody on this Ravens team, including Rashad Bateman, there is nobody on this team who has shown any sign of even being close to that level. And I saw some of y'all try to argue that the receivers we got now were as good as the guys from that Super Bowl season. No, they're not. Anquan Bolden, even at an older age, actually was elite. Torrey Smith was an excellent number 2 option. Torrey Smith was such a good number 2 option that if he was on the Ravens today, you guys would be saying he's the next you would be saying he's the next Jerry Rice. For y'all to hype up the receivers we currently have, like Prochet and Duvernay and the rest of these guys, for y'all to hype them up the way that y'all do, I know for a fact if Torrey Smith was on this team right now, people would be talking about him as if he's the next Randy Moss. Because he was that good at his prime. Again, Jacoby Jones was a really good number 3 option back at his prime. We had a great offense at that time. But it seems like they got spiteful because they had to pay Joe Flacco that year after the Super Bowl. So they decided, hey, let's just throw this offense concept down the toilet. Let's just forget about all this. Let's forget about all of this. And even before Lamar got here, it's been the same problem where they just completely stopped valuing wide receivers. But when you look around the NFL, what is clearly the most important position besides quarterback? It's wide receiver. And Torrey Smith knows this team isn't good enough at receiver. Now, does that mean we can't win a Super Bowl? Not necessarily, but it's going to be 10 times harder than it has to be, because in order to win, we're going to have to outplay and out-execute a bunch of teams that are clearly more talented than us. And it's very concerning to me because, again, this team, they're struggling to show discipline against bad teams like the Panthers. And if you're struggling to show discipline and get all these penalties and have all these drops and make all these mental errors against a team as bad as the Panthers, it's gonna be hard to believe that you're gonna out execute all these elite talent, these teams that are stacked in elite talent once it comes to playoff time and once they crank it up a notch. Because once they crank it up a notch, you're going to have to win a shootout. Did you guys watch that game where the Chiefs played the Chiefs just played the Chargers on Sunday? Did you guys watch that? What happened? That game basically boiled down to a shootout. And they left 30 seconds on the clock, and that was still too much time for the Chiefs offense. And guess what? They still balled out, and they still went out there, got a touchdown, won the game. Because offensively, they're just on a different level. I seen some of y'all take jabs at that Chiefs receiving room and say, oh, all they got is Juju and this and that. And, oh, they got Tony and he's injury prone. Guess what? They're still better than us. You can make whatever critique you want about any of these receiving calls on any of these teams. But at the end of the day, these guys are still better than us. It just is what it is. It just is what it is, man. So yeah, man, I meant for this to be just like a 10-minute video, but this is basically turning into a podcast. That's how a lot of my reactions to some of these videos are. It is what it is. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter, man. But again, I just had to get all this out. I'm gonna definitely chop this up and make it into smaller videos. But you can't be serious if you think that this receiving room can compete with that receiving room that won a Super Bowl in 2012. And you can't be serious if you still have faith in this front office, because they clearly don't care about the offense. And that's ironic, because if they want to get to the Super Bowl like they pretend that they want to, you need better weapons, man. It's laughable to me when I see the Ravens on their YouTube channel post videos talking about how they're in win now mode. You're not in win now mode. Your priority during the during the trade deadline was a linebacker, a position that clearly, based on how our other linebackers are playing as a unit, wasn't truly a need. Maybe it may have been a solid pickup because he's a young guy who plays well, but it wasn't truly a need. You need a receiver. Because when it comes down to it, nobody's gonna look at Roquan. If we get bounced out in the first round, or even if we manage to win a first round game and get to the second round and get bounced out, nobody's gonna look at Roquan Smith and say, oh man, Roquan should have done more. Nobody's gonna do that. All they're gonna do is look at Lamar Jackson and say, well, he should have done more. Even though he has weaker weapons than every other team in the playoffs, they're going to look at him and say he should have done more. But then a lot of y'all, not all of y'all, obviously, I know a lot of Ravens fans are finally accepting the fact that this offense is bad, but a lot of people, they still want to fight this idea. They still, as Lunch Break Hot Take would say, there's still these gatekeepers who want to defend this Ravens front offense. Acting like some Captain Save-A-Holes, acting like it's your job to believe in this team, just have this blind faith in a team that is providing you a bad product. Because you could argue till you're blue in the face. That's why some of y'all, that's why some of the other people, not my subscribers, but that's why some of the other people, when they come into my comments, I'll try to talk to them for one or two comments, but after a couple of back and forths, I'm not continuing a conversation with this person. Because a lot of these people, they still want to buy into this idea that this is the greatest front offense this is the greatest front office in football, and oh, they're so great, and They know what they're doing. They love bringing up the fact that we won 2 Super Bowls. Again, just because you won 2 Super Bowls, one 10 years ago and one 22 years ago, does not mean you're the best front office. Does not mean you're the best front office in football, and it doesn't mean that these guys currently running the show know what they're doing. Because if this was such a great front office, why do we only have 2 Super Bowls and not 6 like the Patriots? If they're as good as y'all want to hype them up to be, why do we have 2 and not 6? I ain't trying to hear no excuses. If they're really as good as y'all want to pretend like they are, to where we can't question them, then we should have 6 Super Bowls and not 2. The Patriots have 6, and even now, you got Patriots fans, they are still questioning this team. Because since Tom Brady left, this team clearly is, even though they're still winning games, they're clearly not as good anymore. They're not as big a threat anymore, and they're headed nowhere fast. But anyway, man, that was me giving my 2 cents. That was me giving my 2 cents on the Ravens-Panthers game. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments section below, and I will be back soon.